Onslow County today, and we have some very special guests from the Onslow County Public Library to help us kick off the new year. We have Karen Moore from Main Branch, and we have Matt Mano from the Swansboro branch of the library. Thank you both for joining us as we kick off 2018. And you all have plenty of programs to help us get started in the new year. So Karen, we'll start with you.
Okay.
I got a new iPad for Christmas. I don't know how it works. So how can you help me, Karen?
We're going to try to help with that. We are going to kick off a series of computer training programs that will run from January through March. And then, of course, we're always available to help you with your questions anytime you come in. But we will have some special time set aside if you need more help with creating Word documents or getting to know your device that maybe you received for Christmas. And also, even if you want to set up email accounts, we're going to try to give some specialized training for that as well.
Well, you know, the technology changes so quickly, and there are all kinds of new ways in which we can communicate. And now, you know, I saw the commercial, you know, over the holidays about the grandma says something about get off your computer, and the kid says, what's a computer?
Right.
Because we don't really even always use what we think of as a traditional computer any longer.
Right.
So you're all going to help us through all of that.
We're going to try to help with that. So lots of individual attention to help guide you through that process.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. Now also, over the holidays, we know that people connect with family, and you all do such a wonderful job. We, you know, have worked together on different genealogy projects, and you all have your genealogy research room. But now maybe I want to publish my genealogy, or I want to use something on my boards that I've created, and you have a very special informational program to help us with that.
We do. We have lots of genealogy topics every month that we try to feature. And in January, we're going to talk about copyright law, because maybe you don't think about that so much when you're posting those family photos online, but it is something to be aware of. So we're going to have a very special guest that specializes in copyright law for documents and publications and photos that might be helpful to you before you start posting all of your family history.
All right, excellent. And again, sometimes it's someone else's research. It's a little more complex than just drawing our family tree.
Exactly.
All right. Now, Richlands branch, kind of in tandem, I know that you all are hosting New Year, New You, starting the first of this month. But also, they're kind of tagging on with that because they've got a walking club that they're starting.
They are. This is going to be brand new. They're very excited about it. It's a walking club, and it's just a great time to get together, socialize, get that fitness in for the new year. And they're just going to be doing some walking through Richlands.
Well, it's a beautiful place to walk, and a great way to kind of get to know the folks in your community as well by joining in. And last but not least, Richlands has one of my favorite people giving a very special program for them, I guess, throughout the winter. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Andy Stengel.
Yeah, Dr. Stengel is going to sort of guide us through Europe, sort of an armchair tour. And just a great way to sit back and relax and have an expert, professor of civilization, to tell you all about those great cities of Europe. And we're going to have refreshments, so it's just be a nice time to come out and relax.
The ticket price is a lot cheaper than flying to Paris.
It is much cheaper. You don't have to worry about baggage, security, absolutely.
And you have an expert tour guide. Dr. Stengel is phenomenal. I just love to listen to him lecture. So that's going to be terrific to have him there in Richlands. And then, Matt, we turn to you because Karen has got us all using our devices perfectly and properly, helped us with our genealogy, got us out walking, and got us fit and kicked off for the new year. And you're doing some fun things for the kiddos as well.
Yes.
For the new year.
Yeah, so once you've finished eating all of your holiday desserts and dinners, we'll be kicking off for our teens specifically. We'll be having a Harry Potter night at the end of January, January 26th for Swansboro, February 2nd for our other 2 branches. We'll be doing it as well, so be sure to check the newsletter for specific times. It will be an after-hours event, but you can come prepared as your favorite Harry Potter character. You can come in regular Muggle clothes, whichever you prefer. You can bring a pair of socks to donate to Free the House Elves. It's going to be a blast. We'll have, of course, Harry Potter specific activities, Harry Potter specific food. We'll have some stuff that the teens can make and take home with them that they can use at home. You know, it'll be fun crafts. It'll have music. It'll just be a lot of fun afterwards. Of course, we'll see if we can get the broomsticks in the air. No promises on that, but I'm sure the magic will be there.
Quidditch.
Maybe on the ground.
Okay. So, when I think about that series, I mean, my daughter's 22.
Yes.
She's read all of the books, beginning a very long time ago, and yet Harry Potter never goes out of favor.
Personally, I feel like it's a classic. It's almost 20 years now, and our library shelves still can't keep them on the shelves. I mean, they're coming out with the illustrated copies now. The movies are still circling like crazy. I mean, people just can never get enough of Harry Potter, so it'll be a blast.
It's magic.
It is.
It's magic. And then our friends down in Sneed's Ferry have a really cool book club.
Yes. So over the summer for summer reading, we kicked off a Buccaneers where our teen interns were doing a genre book club. So we would select specific genres, and the best part about this book club, and Sneed's Ferry is continuing it now, is that your kids don't have to come with a specific book that they had to read, which is what I feel like is one of the greatest parts about this, because they're not forced to read something that they're like, oh, I don't know. So it's going to be great because they can come with any book within the genre that they think is awesome or that they have read that they can share with their friends, and then they'll do some activities specific to that genre that they've done, and then they can just share what books they've loved in it, and then other kids can learn from that genre. If they have never read anything in the genre, they can learn what that genre is. Maybe they'll find a favorite pick that they can start reading and do for their next book report.
And that's just introducing kids to literature in general,
Absolutely.
books in general that can take them somewhere.
Yes, they can discuss their favorite book, but they can also discover new books that they maybe wouldn't have otherwise found.
That is fantastic. So we've kicked off 2018, something for the entire family, something for everyone. Karen, as always, we want to make sure that our viewers know how to reach the library, how to find out more. Give us some information about your website, your social media resources, and of course, main telephone number at main branch, because that can get you just about anywhere.
Right. You can always find us on social media, on Twitter or Facebook, and our website through onslowcountync.gov/library, and our phone number is 910-455-7350.
Well, thank you both for joining us. Thank you for helping us kick off 2018. Really, we're going to go for a walk. We're going to read a new book. And we're going to start out the new year and maybe a new us.
Yes.
So thank you both for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the Onslow County Museum. We're taking a field trip today. We're going to go through the museum to go to our changing gallery. We're going to meet our collections manager, Chance Hellman, and then Chance is going to give us a behind-the-scenes tour as we prepare for our new exhibit entitled "An Ounce of Prevention is Worth a Pound of Cure: A History of Healthcare in Onslow County." Well, welcome to the Onslow County Museum, and we've taken a little field trip here to get to see what's going on at the museum coming up this winter. And joining me now is Chance Hellman. Chance, welcome back to Onslow County today.
Thank you very much.
So Chance, you are the collections manager at the Onslow County Museum. I'd love for you to share with our viewers just a little bit about what that means. You're not collecting stamps, unless they're historic stamps.
Right.
So explain what the collections manager does at the Onslow County Museum, and then we're going to talk about what you're up to next.
Sure. So the collections manager has kind of a wide-ranging variety of roles. So, of course, collections is in the title, and that means that I'm in charge of overseeing the collections that the museum has, and these are artifacts that have to do with the county's history. The other aspect of that is making sure that these artifacts are used to tell stories, and so I'm also the curator at the museum, and so I'm able to take these artifacts and then we use the history that's associated with them to tell stories about different topics in the county.
And you know, you mentioned using the artifacts to tell those stories. Frequently people come into the museum and they'll look at an exhibit and they'll say, well, is there more? And the more we're going to get to take a look at in just a little bit, because the more is our vast collection of artifacts and objects and specimens that you draw from to tell these stories. And you have a very special exhibit coming up. We're opening one the end of this month, end of January, all about healthcare. But I want you to give us some more detail. Give us the title of the exhibit, and then we're going to talk about really how it came together.
The title of the exhibit is "An Ounce of Prevention is Worth a Pound of Cure." And so we're alluding to the fact that there are many different varieties of healthcare that are available in the county. Of course, historically, these are things that would have been home remedies, and then all the way up to the present time when you can go to the hospital, you can go to many different urgent care places. So we're going to look at the history of healthcare in Onslow County. We're going to look at all of the things that entails, including optometry and dentistry, and including some things like quackery. So some of the ideas that might not be true when you think of modern healthcare.
You know, as you've just kind of listed that vast array of medical and health services that the community seeks, certainly the first thing that comes to mind for Onslow County viewers and for Onslow County government is the Onslow County Health Department. And the notion of the health department and what it is as an agency was actually one of the jumping off points for this exhibit. Explain to our viewers how that has really fueled this story.
Absolutely. So that really was the impetus for this exhibit because the health department just moved locations. And so when the new Consolidated Health and Human Services building was built, we were able to go in and collect a lot of the items that were left behind. And these weren't just from the old health department, they came from the old hospital as well. You might know that the health department was in the space that was the old hospital. And so the idea that it was changing, and this was something that was going to change the face of our community in downtown Jacksonville, was the idea that we had to try and tell the story of the health department. And of course that snowballed once we started to look at the history of the health department and the history of public health in the county. That kind of grew into, well, what else was there? What other kinds of healthcare issues did the county face over its history?
And you know, what I was especially taken with as we began talking about that story is when we reached out to the health department, they already had kind of in the back of their minds as they're planning to go ahead and save some of these things for us. So we really met with kind of the same idea that these artifacts, that these items from the health department, and as you said, the Onslow Memorial Hospital, that they knew that these things merited saving. It wasn't just old stuff, it was something that helped tell their story as well as the story of what they've done for the community. When you think about that idea of public health and that jumping off point, for Onslow County, where'd that story begin really?
Perhaps the first instance that we see of this is in the early 1800s. We see a man named Lemuel Hatch is tasked with providing the pest house for the county. And so he essentially has to quarantine people in his home so that they can be inoculated against smallpox. And the idea that the county puts forth a person and says, you are now going to use your home to inoculate people is kind of the first idea that this is a public issue and that this is something that the county is dealing with, not just a doctor per se.
Right. So this notion of assigning someone, requesting that they do that, and then that he's providing public health care for community citizens who are infected with smallpox, seems, as you said, almost like a modern idea, except for the fact that you mentioned he had the pest house. And people are going to think pest, so insects or rodents. But pest house is actually short for
pestilence.
Okay.
So, of course, smallpox is a disease that will affect a lot of people. It's highly contagious, and so it is a pestilence. And so that's what that house really would have been termed.
And the great part about that is we sort of know where that was during that early 19th century. And you're actually going to be exhibiting a sign that tells a little bit of that story as well, correct?
Sure. And so the pest house actually moved around the county. That first one was in Upper Southwest, but the county home was both for the sick and indigent, but also for the poor. And so it moved at different locations, and we have historical markers that talk about that.
Excellent. Now, as we're looking around this space, this is the actual gallery space where we're going to install the healthcare exhibit. And the items that you've pulled for us to look at today are items that would have been in the health department. So tell us a little bit about just what we might be seeing.
Sure. So part of what we're going to do in this space when the exhibit opens is create essentially an exam room. So these are items the health department would have used. Of course, one of their primary focuses is education. And so they're trying to teach citizens in the county how to live healthier lives. And so items like this medical chart, which shows how the body works, is going to be something they might use if they're talking about a specific disease and how it affects someone. And then the cases that we have along this back wall and cabinets were medical cabinets that were installed in the 1950s, right at the transition when they built the new wing onto the hospital. And that allowed the health department to come into that space. And some of these remained in that space through the life of the hospital, and then when the health department moved back into the 1970s.
All right. You know, I think that another thing that this will do for folks is because that hospital was situated in that location for so long, and then the health department, many people have direct association, direct memories about either being born, maybe not memories of being born, but certainly family stories of being born in the hospital, family members who may have been treated at the hospital. They may have worked at the hospital through time. And so this will probably, I think, stir a lot of memories for folks as well. Talk a little bit about how that idea of personal recollection or personal memories also plays a part in how you develop exhibits and the storylines.
Sure. Well, these exhibits are often, they're not just from me, these are about the community. And so these stories that people tell us are what helps us build the story of the exhibit. And so having anecdotes about what you experienced perhaps with your doctor or your dentist, or having a family story of being born in the old hospital before it was torn down, are ways that we can connect with the community and that the community can connect with itself. These are stories that might spark other stories, and so people then begin to tell their own stories. And that's something we also like to hear. We'd love to have people share those stories with us.
And I have to get you to share one specific story because our board chairwoman here at the museum loaned us a very special artifact that connects with that. And Arthene Thomas has loaned us recently something that is a personal family treasure. Tell us what she's loaned us.
So we have her birth certificate from the original hospital and also the receipt for when her father paid for her bill when she was born, her pink slip, if you will. And so that's kind of neat to have that object, but it's really neat to see how much it cost to have a baby in the 1950s versus what it costs to have a baby today.
And it's pretty remarkable that her family knew that that was something they needed to save. You know, we all have a baby book, perhaps, but the actual receipt, when her parents got to bring her home from the hospital, is a pretty remarkable personal artifact, and we're grateful that she's sharing that with us. So we talk about the hospital, certainly. We talk about the role of public health. We're also going to talk a little bit about individual physicians as well. And share with us a little bit about how you're gathering that information about physicians.
So there are a number of resources that we can use, historic resources, as well as anecdotes like we just talked about, especially for physicians that would have been here in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and on. But it's more difficult when you get to physicians that practiced in the 1800s and early 1900s. And so newspaper accounts certainly can help. Census records can help. But one of the most interesting sources that we have access to are the minutes of and bulletins of the meetings that happened between the North Carolina State Board of Health and the Medical Association, as well as for dentistry and ophthalmology. These associations recorded who these physicians were, where they practiced, the types of things that they dealt with, but they also allowed them a space to publish articles. And so we're able to learn about what these physicians were working on in their home county of Onslow because they write about it.
And we're going to meet a couple of physicians who are really revolutionaries in some of the ways that they helped eradicate disease, in the way in which they treated disease, and the fact that they took their profession as physicians and then went on to help not only the community, but the state at large in a number of ways. One in particular that we're going to feature is Dr. Cyrus Thompson. And tell us just a little bit, give us just a sneak peek into the life of Dr. Thompson.
So Dr. Thompson lived close to Richlands, and he was part of a pretty important family at the time of farmers. He became a physician and he practiced in Onslow for a time, but he didn't make a whole lot of money in the beginning, and so he had to quit being a physician and start farming. And when he got back into being a physician, he was an advocate for public health, and so he spent a lot of time with the community and the people around here. But then he went on to take that into politics, and because he was a populist party member, he ran for several different offices in state politics and tried to promote public health in that way.
And we're eventually going to find out that he becomes Secretary of State for the state of North Carolina. So he takes that that message from Richlands to Onslow to the state at large. Absolutely. And so we're looking forward to learning more and meeting Dr. Thompson and other physicians in much more detail within the exhibit. Now, on the other side of the coin, because we've talked a lot about public health and the professionalism and professionalization of medicine, then we're also going to talk a little bit about sort of a twist on that, and not just alternative medicine or holistic medicine, but also we saw in the late 19th, early 20th century, the introduction of some not quite legitimate types of medicine, and talk a little bit about what came on trend during that era.
Sure. So we might term these pseudosciences today, right? Quackery certainly is a term that's used. Perhaps the most important one, or one of the most obvious ones, is called phrenology, and that's the study of the human skull in order to determine people's character traits. So the idea that the shape of your cranium is going to mimic the shape of your brain. And of course, that's where your character comes from, or so that's thought. And because of the different shapes, you're going to have different traits. You might behave in different ways. And so there were people who were deemed physicians who studied this. And we had a prominent one here in Onslow County, and he went around almost as if it was a traveling circus, if you will. And he went to different towns, and he would massage your head and feel your skull, and then tell you what your personality is.
So not just that, oh, my head hurts, I've got a headache today, but I am of exemplary character, or not, by feeling of your skull.
Right. You might be more philanthropical. You might be prone to not do domestic duties. All kinds of things.
I think I had that bump.
All kinds of things you might find out just by touching your skull. And of course, today we know that is not true. That is not how the skull works or the brain works. But it was relied upon by a lot of people at the time.
Well, the exhibit will be here in the gallery, but not everything certainly is in place, and we want to go take some time and go with you behind the scenes into the museum's collection area to look at the variety of artifacts we've collected during our more than 40-year history that are now coming together to tell the story. So we'll take a quick break, we'll go into collections and take a look around.
Sounds good.
So Chance, we're in collections, which really most of the public has not had an opportunity to see. And we always say essentially that the back of the house has to equal the front of the house in size. But talk about really how collections are the heart of a museum.
So what people see in the gallery is maybe 10% of what we actually house, artifact-wise. And people come to the permanent gallery and they learn about the county's history, but when we do these exhibits that are topic specific, we pull from our collections in order to tell those stories. And so we have a wide-ranging collection that allows us to tell those stories. And so we come back, for instance, for this exhibit to pull medical utensils, instruments, tools, equipment, things like that.
Now, you know, what you and I use, we use a term called provenance or provenance, and we want to know the origin of the artifact so that we can better tell the story. It really gives it more support. And I can't think of too many artifacts within our collection that we have a richer, fuller story about and a contemporary connection still to this day than this item right here. So tell us a little bit, because at first glance, it might be a little bit difficult for our viewers to completely understand what this artifact is.
Sure. You can tell it's a chair. It has wheels. So this is a homemade wheelchair from the 1890s. And the Justice family in Southwest had a member of their family, Hedrick Justice, who could not walk. He was crippled. And so the family built this wheelchair for him. But that's not the neatest part about this. They made the wheelchair, but they had to have a way for him to make the farm accessible. And so they paved portions of the farm pathways that he could then wheel this chair around to get to different areas, including a small house with a low door that was served as an office for him.
You know, if people were to visit the family farm even today, they would see remnants of those little trails, of those little pathways. And I think what's so awesome about it is in the 21st century, certainly we are always mindful of accessibility. You know, we have the American with Disabilities Act. We want to make sure our spaces are accessible to all members of our community. And here's a family who more than 100 years ago realized the importance of having their family member with them and not keeping him isolated simply because he could not navigate the farm in the same way that they could, but they made it possible. So this is a pretty spectacular piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we kind of move forward in time, we have another iteration, if you will, of a similar device, but completely different. And talk a little bit about this artifact, just kind of its design, and it has a kind of a particular name associated with it.
Sure. So this wheelchair here, we jumped forward about 40 years. This is around 1937 or so that this chair was manufactured. Perhaps not as comfortable in the seat as one that's woven like this ladder back chair here, but more comfortable in the sense that it has supports for your legs and it allows you to wheel yourself a little bit better with the hand rails on the wheels. It also allows for somebody to push you a little bit easier than perhaps the ladder back chair.
And I think sometimes, you know, when we look at this, we oftentimes think of one of our more illustrious presidents who at the time in the 30s and 40s when he was president did not always reveal his own challenges. And tell us a little bit about how this resembles in some way the design of FDR's chair.
Sure. So FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of course, suffered from polio, and so he was not able to walk either, or not for very long periods of time, and so he relied on a wheelchair much of the time. His was very similar to this design. In fact, I believe the same company made his wheelchair as made this one. The differences were for his, he was a little more comfortable. I think he had a cane back chair, would have made it a little more easy to sit in for long periods of time.
And it really, the idea was for it to look as chair-like as possible. Right. So thinking about that, what for the time would have been modern design, and then this being more of a household complete innovation by Mr. Hedrick Justice's family.
Interestingly enough, this also would look much like a chair too. So they're very similar in terms of the aesthetic that they're putting off for their time period.
Well, these are great pieces. We're going to see these as well as a 1970s model as well. So as we think about other disciplines within medicine, we sometimes think of, you know, even from colonial periods and before, we talk about the apothecary. So as we kind of move around collections, we're going to talk about the pharmacist or the apothecary and its role in the community. So we'll kind of slide around here, if you will. And, you know, there are a lot of pharmacies in Onslow County, as we've heard through the years. We're kind of much like the hardware store or the grocery store, the little grocery store, gathering places. And so tell us about this piece and why this particular store just brings to mind so many memories for folks.
So this item came from Ketchum's Drugstore, which at its height had 2 locations in Jacksonville, one at Midway Park and one in downtown Jacksonville. And this is where you would have gone to get some of your basic remedies. So some of these might have been over-the-counter types of medicines, but some of them would have had to have been compounded by the pharmacist there. And then, of course, they would have to label these things once they'd done that. And these labels would have been pulled from this table. But these pharmacies were not just a place where you'd get your medicine. A lot of times they had soda fountains and they had a deli, a place where you might go and have a snack. Kids after school might meet there and have a milkshake, something like that. But it's also a place where news traveled. So people gathered there in order to swap gossip. But they might buy their newspaper there and then discuss the things they read about. So politics, current events, all of these would have taken place at the drugstore.
I love, it is the notion of gathering place. But it's also a really important place because before, as you said, we relied on home remedies or perhaps what the physician themselves could provide. But now we can go to a place, get what we need, and the fact that this cabinet was saved and the fact that we have these labels is just a great connection to that idea of that transition. If we can look really closely, tell us some of the medications, maybe those that are familiar to us, and maybe those that might seem a little either unfamiliar or hard to believe that was prescribed.
Sure. So there are some interesting ones here, some that we might even have today, things like cloves and olive oil, not necessarily used by us today for medicinal purposes, but certainly cloves do have some medicinal purposes still. Paregoric is something that we see all the time in the early 20th century, late 19th century as being prescribed. But there are some neat ones too, like peppermint. The essence of peppermint is an oil, perhaps helps you breathe better, right? But today we might use it just because it smells great. Mm-hmm. There are some that even I don't know, carbolic acid, for instance. That sounds like it might be wonderful to use, but I have no idea what for.
So we're going to find out maybe, and find out a little bit more about Ketchum Drugstore and other pharmacies and the pharmacists themselves when we visit this exhibit. Well, we're going to move around the gallery, around the collection space now. You know, my kids love their dentist. I mean, he's got all kinds of cool technology, and it's bright and beautiful. Not everybody has the same memories of visiting their dentist. Certainly, technology has made a difference. So we want to go take a look.
Absolutely.
All right. So Chance, many people of a certain age view this as a torture device because this is very, very different than our contemporary dental care, certainly by far. But this, for the time, was state of the art. So tell us about not only what we're looking at, but also with whom it's associated.
Sure. So this was manufactured and purchased in the late 1930s by Dr. Ludlow Turner, who had a dentist office in downtown Jacksonville, starting about 1938 on, and he practiced for a time as the only physician or the only dentist in the county. And so this is where you would have gone if you needed something fixed on your teeth or just to have a teeth cleaning. And of course, if you look at the tools, you can see that some of these look not medieval, but certainly much less technologically advanced than the tools that you're used to seeing in your dentist's office today. And we do have anecdotes from people who sat in this exact chair and said that it wasn't the most comfortable place to be.
Well, you know, even the idea of dental care as a profession in the 1930s was still relatively new. And as you said, Dr. Turner is the only dentist in the county. And he's preceded by whom? Because there's a connection between the two of them as well.
There is. So Onslow County's first dentist didn't appear in the county until about 1900. His name was Onslow J. Bender. And Dr. Bender performed dental services in the county and up into Pollocksville area as well for about 30 years before the arrival of Dr. Turner. And at the same time, Dr. Bender passed away. And so really Onslow only had one dentist for a very long period of time. And at the time, of course, it was kind of rudimentary. Before that, you might have just let your tooth go. Somebody else might have pulled it. You pull it at home. But there wasn't any cleaning, so to speak, the way we would think of it today.
No preventative care, really. We don't really even make that association, certainly. And Dr. Bender himself, being a late 19th century figure, sort of features into the story of dentistry. You shared with me that he actually presented papers and wrote essays about this emerging profession. Talk a little bit about how he talks to new dentists about what he thinks they should do.
Sure. So Dr. Bender was a member of the North Carolina Dental Association, and he presented papers and topics to them, one of which was about the dentist's bedside manner, if you will, and how you ought to treat patients. And one of the things that he said was that people are coming to you because they have a problem already, and so you need to greet them with a smile. You need to be happy to see them, because if you're in a bad mood when they get there, that's not going to increase the likelihood of them returning. They might think, well, I can just take care of it at home. But it also makes them a little more fond of the dentist, which can only serve to better the practice and make more dentists feel comfortable and want to practice.
Excellent. So we're going to have this on display. And again, talking about the evolution of dentistry in the community and looking at how that technology certainly has changed. We even have a representation because Dr. Turner, being in practice for so long, his actual equipment stays the same, but he adds to it as he modernizes, right?
Absolutely. So this chair is originally from the late 1930s, but then he adds pieces of equipment as technology progresses in the 50s and 60s so that he can better serve his patients.
Well, Chance, we're going to kind of move down the gallery space, the exhibit collection space, and take a look at what looks like an ordinary chair. So Chance, I recently had somebody tell me that they had a collection of 4 of these that they used at, or something that looked really similar to this, at their counter in their kitchen when they were a kid growing up. And so you and I, as we were looking for artifacts, realized that this wasn't just maybe a chair that was used at a draftsman table or a clerk's desk. This has a little more specific destination, what it was meant for.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a circa 1910 Bausch & Lomb optometry chair. And so this is essentially an exam chair that you would sit in at an optometrist to have your eyes examined before you were prescribed glasses.
The great part is, again, it's oak. It looks like a clerk's chair. But then as we did our research, as you did your research, and dug a little deeper, which is what you always do, found that this is something that was specifically, you know, Bausch & Lomb, for anybody who wears contacts today, that's a really, you know, familiar name. And here they were designing chairs for the optometrist.
Mm-hmm. And we see that with several companies throughout this exhibit. As technology progresses, as different modes of professional areas of medical history progress, the companies that design certain things, they change what they design and what they make because they have to. They have to stay relevant to the profession.
As we're kind of leaving the collection space, leaving out from this room, when people come to the museum to see this exhibit, what are some of the things you want them to really look for and walk away with?
Well, I would like people to see this evolution of healthcare. So the idea that some of these things look very medieval to us. These are, it's difficult to imagine yourself being in a place where you would have to actually sit in that dentist chair, for instance, or sit in this optometrist chair. But that it has evolved, and so as people have progressed in their technology, they've come up with better solutions to our medical problems. But all of that is connecting with their community. All of that is about serving the community that you live in.
And I'm so glad you said that as well about community, because we also have discussed the connections that you've made just by looking in the county commission minute books from the early 20th century, from the late 19th century into the early 20th century. And you've found some things about the role of the county in healthcare. One in particular that I'm thinking about that might surprise them, and that occurred in the early 20th century, about 1904. What was going on in the county that people might be surprised to learn had occurred in our area?
So I think you're referencing the smallpox epidemic, and so it was 1902, late November, December, January of 1902, we had upwards of 50 cases of smallpox in Onslow County. And this occurred primarily around the Tar Landing area, but it spread, and so people were, presumably they were scared, and they had reason to be about how fast this was going to spread and how far it was going to spread. And you might think of smallpox as being, again, a very medieval disease. This is something we think about from a long time ago, or even colonial period. We don't think about it as being, just over 100 years ago right here in our county that people would be afflicted with something like that.
And the physicians who were responsible for that care, for several years from that initial outbreak, for several years are treating patients, assuring the public that it's been eradicated. We see, reports being given that nope, no more. We even see one indication from a dry goods store where someone had to assure that nothing was contaminated. This notion, we think about contemporary treatment of epidemic or pandemic type diseases, and they were putting into place these measures.
And one of the things you mentioned, the dry goods store, one of the reasons that someone would be very adamant about how clean it was and that it wasn't contaminated is one of the methods they used to fix that was burning it down. And so we see in other counties reports of structures, at least in the Board of Health minutes, that they've burned these structures down because that's where they quarantine people, and it was deemed the best way to make sure that the smallpox virus was eradicated.
Well, I think as we look at this exhibit, we're going to find lots of surprises. We're going to see some things that are familiar, that we can connect with. And then you're going to conclude the exhibit with some very interesting information and looking at the 21st century. Talk a little bit about how you're going to draw things to a close that people can look for.
So we'd like to look at the new Consolidated Health and Human Services building, of course, but how healthcare has changed, that now it's very proactive, where it used to be a response to problems in the community, a response to medical issues. We're now very proactive with education, and we're also the access we have to healthcare is pretty wide-ranging. It's in the news very frequently. We talk about the issues we still have with healthcare, but if you look at it historically, there are all kinds of avenues you can take, from hospitals to primary care physicians to the doc in the box, right? You can go to the urgent care center. There are all of these avenues, including the health department, that you can use to find health care.
Well, Chance, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, bring us behind the scenes. I know you're really busy putting, all the final touches on the exhibit that people will be able to look forward to. So we appreciate that. We also appreciate you letting us really get to know you and your role in the county and in the museum, and also letting us know that sometimes a chair isn't just a chair. So we look forward to learning more about healthcare in Onslow County.
I'm happy to provide it, absolutely.